Okay, let's try that again. That's the problem with microphones, especially when it comes in three parts like this. Three things to turn on, and I had 2 out of 3, and 2 out of 3 ain't good enough. So I think it's working now. If you'd like to just confirm that, I've got 1 minute, 15 seconds to solve it. Hello, good evening and welcome to In Studio Live, the 75th edition. Sunday the 6th of June, and we're here in, well, I've called a catch-up and Q&A and copyright session. It's a catch-up one, as I'll explain later, because I'm not setting a challenge to do, or an exercise to do with the before and after challenge. And each of the live streams, as you've probably realised, sort of dovetail in with those exercises as I've been doing them. So what I had planned for this week, because I was having the break in the exercises to give people the chance to catch up, thus the title, it meant that I couldn't really do that topic this week. I will do it next week. So tonight I'm going to answer some of your questions and specifically talk about copyright. I'm also going to give you a little bit of an update on what's been going on here at the studio and what's coming up. And I'm going to walk you through a shoot as well. I did a shoot on Friday with Tatiana, assisted by Rick. And I'm going to just talk you through that. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I, on this? Because actually, what I should be doing is telling you that you really need to subscribe, like, and share. And as ever, thank you to everybody who has been doing that. I really appreciate it. And it really helps if you do that. And don't forget to click the little bell icon as well when you hit the subscribe, because that also helps. Right, yeah, and join the Facebook group, link down below, because that's where the conversation carries on. And my newsletter. I sent out a newsletter this week with details of the events that are coming up at the studio. I wanted to keep people who are local informed of what was going on here. So that's what's been going on there. So it's very much an interactive show tonight, and I'm going to try and answer your questions. I haven't got that many, so it could be quite a short show. So we'll see how we go on. One question came in before, which was about watermarks and the point of using them, and I want to cover that, and in particular talk a little bit about copyright, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about copyright, and hopefully some of the things I've got to say on that will help you. So on the show, I've already mentioned it's catch up, no before and after challenge. I'm dealing with your questions, I already said, copyright and watermarks. I've got this tutorial on how to create a copyright brush within Photoshop. I'm sure it's also possible in Affinity. I just haven't learnt it in Affinity, but I do know how to do it in Photoshop. So this week it's Photoshop that I'll show you how to do it. And of course, as ever, I've got feedback on your images. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. And the member photo of the week to finish off with. So stay tuned for that at the end. It might be your photo. Right, let's start with the first feedback session. I say this every week and I make no excuses for saying it each time because I'm not getting much coming to feedback at ians-studio.co.uk, but I can give you much better feedback if you send me images there because I can see the shooting information. So I'm going to head over to Lightroom and we'll have a look at some of the images that I've had by email, which isn't that many. Right, so what we've got here is, and I'll just change my display, metadata EXIF. Right, this is a shot that was created here in my studio by Paul, and it was the water splash, model splash event from the other week, and it's quite an interesting effect that you've got there with it, Paul. You can see almost two images superimposed one on top of the other. You've got the frozen water, but you've also got these streaks of blurred water as well. So how was that achieved? Well, Paul shot this at a 30th of a second, not the 125th of a second that I was recommending. And he's come up with something really rather interesting. He's thought outside the box. He thought, well, we've got just a little bit of ambient light there. So by going to a 30th of a second, he's got that blurring of the water, and it's given this really interesting effect. You've got that superimposed set of images. The only problem that has occurred with it is that we've got a strange white balance in there. It's come out a little bit hot, I would say, on that. So I think the only thing it needs is just cooling down very slightly to sort those tones out. So if I just go full screen, you can see that a little bit better. That's before and after. It's quite subtle, but it just gives it a bit more natural tones on the skin with that. But other than that, it's a really nice shot and a good, an interesting way of doing it. I hadn't thought about it. What I'd be interested to know, Paul, is whether it was intentional or whether you just knocked to the shutter speed on your camera on there. But it's certainly something next time I'm doing that type of shoot I'm going to experiment with. I might also just adjust the crop so that Maddie is in the middle of it. So there we go. And that would be what I would do on there. But if we look at the settings on here, the key settings are the exposure. We were shooting at 5.6. We were shooting at ISO 200 because we were working with speed lights. I wanted to keep the duration as short as possible to freeze the water on there. So that's that. Right, the next one, Paul sent me another one, which is a cloud photo. There was a little bit of debate going on the live stream the other week about clouds, because I used to work at the Met Office, and I won't say called somebody out, but I pointed out that I could see that there'd been a replacement sky going on because the clouds weren't right. So I suspect Paul sending me this one is to test my knowledge of clouds, and I would think it's probably a cumulostratus on there. Very difficult to tell from this because I haven't got a sense of scale on there. But I'm guessing cumulostratus with it. It's a nice sunset, nice reflection on there. Not sure what's going on with the white at the side, so we definitely need to get rid of that. And there's a little bit of a something down here, so I'd also get rid of that on there. And I do like the sort of pastel-y look with it, but simply because of my own, if I was shooting this in my own style, I'd probably bring the contrast up just a fraction and bring the clarity up just a little bit to bring out a bit more of the detail in the clouds like that on there. So yeah, I like that. It's a nice sort of backgroundy type image. It's a nice abstract made from the clouds. I could imagine if I'd created an image like that, using it as a thumbnail on a video, something along those lines with it. So let's see what shooting information we've got. It's 50th of a second, yeah, f8, fine. Yeah, everything is looking good on there. The only question I would have is about your metering mode on that, Paul, because the way spot metering works is when you take a reading using spot metering, typically you would be in manual mode rather than aperture priority, which I think you were on there. But the idea is you put your center point over a mid-tone that's in the light that you want to capture. You put it over and read with that over a mid-tone. And I don't think there were really any mid-tones on there. It's hard to tell because this would be all backlit. So I'd have been tempted to go with evaluative on there, but that's a personal thing. I tend to use evaluative most of the time and use exposure compensation, but that's just my way of working. But I'm not quite sure how you metered that in spot metering mode. It doesn't seem to me to be the type of image I would use spot metering mode on. So that's the only thing to say on there. And Gary has sent me a nice image of Birchen Edge, good black and white conversion. I'm just going to, I'll go into, no I won't, I'll stay in here and let's have a look at these settings first. 24mm lens, so it's a nice wide angle shot on there. No exposure compensation used, ISO 200. Yeah, center weighted averaging, which I don't know with Sony whether that's the same as sort of the evaluative or program or matrix metering modes that from other cameras. Center weighted average normally certainly on Canons does analyze the whole image, but then gives more priority to the center of the image, which would have been probably somewhere down here, unless Gary took the meter reading and then recomposed, because he's in aperture priority mode. But if he took the meter reading as he took the shot, it's taking it from round about here, which I suppose, as it is it's a grey tarmac, if it's a mid sort of lighting on there, it's probably fine on it, especially it's quite light. That's giving a silhouette effect on there. Yeah, it's worked on that with it. The only thing I would say with it, really, I'm trying to line up with this one on my screen. It looks slightly different on here to when I was looking at it at home, but that's not. But in terms of composition, bizarrely, when I looked at it at home, it just felt slightly lopsided, and I think it still is slightly lopsided. You've got the vignette, but the tree being offset and the vignette off there, it feels a little odd with it. There's nothing you can do about it. just a bit strange. I do like the shot, and that's purely a nitpick, Gary, on there with it. And I don't know whether I'd change anything if I could on it. It's sort of screaming out for some motivational quote at the bottom. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or the road goes ever onwards. The quote from The Hobbit, or something like that. And you've got nice space to be able to make this into a meme on there. So nice shot. Anything else to say about it? 1/320th of a second is more than adequate on there. F13 to get that depth of field. I'm glad you haven't gone any further. You've stayed in an area where your lens is most likely to be sharper, and particularly combined with 24mm, you should have a huge depth of field on there. And zooming in to look at critical focus, yeah, that is really sharp all the way to the horizon and all the way down here. I'm just going to do one other thing with this, because I think this might be quite interesting. I've got a plugin installed because I want to know where you were focusing, and I can't find. There's plugin extras, show focus points. Now, here we go. Cannot display the focus information on this photo. Reason: Nikon / Sony camera. No information found. Oh well, I still don't know, but I was wondering how the focusing had happened. Let me go back to there. I'm gonna pull up that focusing information for this one. Plugin extras, show focus points. The recently selected photo does not contain enough information to show focus points. So much for installing the plugin. Right, okay. Right, anyway, those were the three on there that have been sent by email. Right, let me do a bit of a catch-up on chat, because some things have been happening on chat while I've been out of here. Rick's arrived. Hi, Rick. Terry is saying that center weighted is exactly as I described on Sony, and that it is evaluative. Oh no, so it's multi-segment on Sony is the equivalent on there. So that answers that one. Right, let's move on here. So the before and after challenge, which has been running, just want to say a few things about that. Excuse me. If you are late to it, don't worry about it. Do have a go. We've not got many. A few people seem to have fallen by the wayside recently, but don't worry about that. Just get on and do the challenges in your own time, and keep posting them to the Facebook group. And I will pick them up on here and comment about them. And if you are behind, I'm not setting a new one this week, so you've got this week to use as a bit of a catch up on there. Just work your way through those stages. Start at the beginning and move on. And I will be posting the two videos which never went up as standalone. I'll get those up tomorrow and Tuesday on there. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a series of photo assignments. The first assignment we did 8-9 weeks ago now, and it was all about going to a location and getting a sense of place of it in your photos. And that's your before images, because you're going to redo that assignment at the end. And then we've looked at things like composition, freezing and blurring the action, aperture and depth of field. I've been giving exercises on how to do those. And whilst you might think, well, I know about these, actually doing the exercise helps crystallize it in your mind. And I think those who've been doing it have found them actually really, really helpful to do that on there. Right, night photography was one, and I'm going to show you some images from night photography that Terry's produced in a little while. And last week we did one on exposure composition, and I'm going to show you some images on that. So if you started this, use this week to catch up and get up to date. I've already shot the next, oh, and reflectors. We did reflectors last week, exposure compensation the week before. I've already shot the exercise 8. I filmed it on Friday with Tatiana and a bit of help from Rick on there, and I'm not showing it or uploading it this week because I want to give you that break, but it's in the bag ready for next week, and that will appear as part of next week's live stream on there. So let's have a look at some feedback on these. I'm going to do Terry's first, so I just need to set this up on here because it's come in as a PDF, which means if I do that, you can now see it. Actually, I'll do it over my shoulder to start with. And it's the night photography one, where the aim of the exercise was to look at the sunset time, official sunset time, get there before that, do a couple of shots before then, and then periodically throughout that time, before sunset to some time later, just take shots so you can see and find that perfect time for night photos. And I said on my exercise video that it's there's a window of 20 minutes which starts about 20 minutes after sunset time, and Terry has documented exactly the times he was doing these and the settings he was using, and it really helps put this into perspective. So I'll step through those now. And he did them on the 2nd of June at Stockport Plaza, and sunset was 9:28, and he started at 9:22 and finished at 10:16. And all he was presumably in aperture priority mode, f9, ISO 100, and then just adjusted his exposure time accordingly. And this is what he came up with. So that's 5 minutes before sunset time, and you can see it's just not really working as a shot. At sunset time, it's 0.6 of a second. Again, we're still not there. And we can see even just 3 minutes later how the sky's starting to turn blue now. We've got the bus going past at 4 minutes. At 12 minutes, we're starting to get there. It's a little bit dark on the buildings because the camera's picking up most of the exposure information from the brighter sky at this point. 14 minutes, the buildings are starting to show up because that longer exposure is now, because the sky's a little bit darker, it's now picking things up from the building with the exposure. 18 minutes, we're starting to get the light trails in there with that. 18 minutes, we're just getting up to the start of that magic window. I do love the streaks of light going past on that one, Terry. Well done. There, 24 minutes. This is starting to look like a bit more like a night shot now. And then 26. At 30 minutes, a 4-second exposure. Yeah, that's approximately 30 minutes. So we're now round about halfway through that magic 20 minutes that starts 20 minutes after sunset. So this is typically the best time to get the shot. So this image looks really good, but now as you can see, as we get beyond there, the artificial light is dominating. We're losing the blue in the sky. And 42 minutes, so we're now at the very end of that magic window, and beyond there whilst it's an interesting shot, we've not got the sky, we've not got much of the detail on the buildings to the left, and then 7 minutes after the magic window, the sky's just about all gone on those. So right back to the end there. And yeah, we've sort of lost the top of the building and the detail into the sky on that. So that was there. So thank you for sharing that one with us, Terry. That's really a really interesting set of images and examples on there. Now over to Lightroom, where I should be able to show you Paul's JPEGs. No, not there. Lightroom. No, that's not Lightroom. Where's Lightroom? The one who's stolen Lightroom. Lightroom being a pain again. So what's new? Right. So here we've got Paul's images, which was from the reflectors one that I set last week. So again, if I go full screen so you can see, and Paul used a dummy. That's one with just the light coming in from camera right on there. You can see just the right side of the image is illuminated. And there we've got, I think that would be a tinfoil reflector. It looks a little bit more specular in the highlights on there. And then with a white reflector, I think actually we can just about see it over here on there. And that's a much smoother look to it. The only thing I would say, Paul, is your reflector appears to finish about here. It would have been better if it could have gone a little bit higher up to sort of light the top of the face. And you can see, hopefully you can see my mouse on here. At this point, you can see where the reflector is doing the job, but not up at the top here with it. So just be aware of that. Typically, if you were doing this as a portrait on someone, you would put the reflector in line with their face to illuminate the face on there. So thank you for doing it. I hope you found those the exercise helpful, Paul, on that. So what's been going on in chat while I've been talking? Question from Gary, who asks, when you're working outside of COVID restrictions, how frequently do you find yourself cleaning your camera sensor? That depends on the camera, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm now on my 4th digital main camera. And if I go through all 4 of them, I can tell you the frequencies I would clean them. My first camera was a 10D, and that was absolutely rock solid when it came to not having dust on the sensor. There was no sensor cleaning, shaking the sensor and all that, but it was just really good, and I probably needed to clean the sensor once every 6 months. Then I got the 5D Mark I, and that thing is an absolute dust magnet. And I went to Tunisia within 3 weeks of getting the camera, and I thought, with the previous one, I only ever needed to clean it about once every 6 months, so I didn't bother taking with me the sensor cleaning kit. And in Tunisia, which is a little bit dusty, it's not. I've been to dustier places, but within a couple of days of being there, if I shot with a very small aperture, I had literally hundreds of dust spots on the sensor to clean out afterwards. It was a real pain with it. The 5D Mark III had the shaking sensor. By that stage, that had been developed, and as you powered on and powered off, it shook the sensor and the dust dropped off. So that, I probably ended up having to clean the sensor once a year, maybe a little bit more frequently than that, but that was my level of use. But a lot did depend on where I was using it on there. The R5 that I've just got, it's too early days to say. I've not had to clean the sensor on it since getting it. Again, it's got its sensor cleaning mode. It shakes the sensor to knock the dust off when you power it on and power it off. So that's my situation. It's very different from camera to camera, and how long you will need, how often you'll need to do yours, I think will be determined by your camera on there. With that, I see that Gary's just posted another question. Let's see. Got a set of extension tubes this week. What are the differences using them with a 40 to 70 zoom and a 12 to 24 wide angle zoom? Is one better than the other? Right. I've not used my extension tubes with a 12 to 24. Basically, extension tubes are for macro, so typically you would use them with a slightly longer lens because if with the wide angle you end up it's all about being able to get in close, and you got in close, but you then got this super wide angle, so it still doesn't look very big in the frame. So you really want the longer of those lenses. I tend to use mine, or used to use mine. I got to get some replacement ones. I used to use mine often with my 50mm lens or my 24-105, and I tended to be more at the longer end when I was using them on there. And I say I've got to get some replacements. I've got to do some research because the ones I've got do not work at all with the R5. Now, that's perhaps not surprising because the RF mount's different, but I thought, oh, I'll be okay. I'll put the adapter on the R5, put the extension tubes on, and then put the 50mm lens on there. But no, it's not having it. You just cannot set an aperture. It just doesn't work with it. So I've got to do a bit of research on that one on there. Yeah, Rick's point's very valid about sensor cleaning, and he's saying, yeah, sensor cleaning, you do it when the extra post-production becomes annoying. That might be one spot, it might be 100 spots on there, but ideally do it just before it gets annoying, because you'll get annoyed and then think, why didn't I do it before I went out on the shoot with that? So right, let's head back to the PowerPoints, and at this point I just want to talk about forthcoming events at the studio. I know there's a few of you who are well within reach, and oh, I've just spotted a few names on the live chat that I haven't said hello to, so sorry if I missed you and not referenced you. Peter, hi, thanks for saying hello. Terry, I've spoken to, and Paul, good evening from the Lake District. I've been talking about you, so you'll have to watch the early part later if you've joined in the middle on there. Yeah, events at the studio, things coming up which you might want to consider. We've got an art nude night coming up in a couple of weeks' time with model Kelsey, who's been to the studio before, really good model, going to be working with a pair of strip lights to create some nice art nude effects on there. It's basically what I used to do is my badger lighting setup, but taken to a different level by using 2 strip boxes rather than just 2 soft boxes on there. So that's one of the setups. But once I've got people booked in on this, I'm going to ask if there's any particular art nude setups that you want to work on with it. I've got 2 places left. One of the attendees from Friday is allegedly going to be booking one of those spaces, so there may only be 1 space very soon. If you want to join me for that one, do book early. The week after that, I've got a studio day with model Millie Gray coming to the studio. Good model. It's by the hour. If you're the sort of person who perhaps just wants to just spend time working one-to-one with a model, just you and the model in a studio, but you don't want to book a model for a full day or a couple of hours in the studio and that, this is a really cheap way of doing it. You can book by 1 hour and just do a whole load of things. And if you're not comfortable with lighting, I'm going to be here, I'll set lights up and then just leave you to it. But I can also, for an extra 20 quid, I can turn it into a mentored shoot for you. So you get an hour of effectively one-to-one training with me and Millie as your model. So again, we've got plenty of spaces still available on that. So please book your place on there. Horror Night, yeah, really looking forward to this one. I'm running it over 2 nights. The 1st of July, which is the Thursday, and the 2nd of July. Now, the first one I put on the calendar, which is the 2nd, is fully booked up. So I then put the 2nd night on, which is on the 1st. It's confusing, isn't it? That one's got 1 person booked at the moment. We've got 2 places left. I expect those will go when I start really advertising at that on there. So do get booked in on that. I'll be announcing the model midweek on that. I've had a casting call up. I've had some really good models apply for it, and I've had one 47-year-old bloke who wants to be Carrie, and I've decided to no, and not the model I'm looking for. Main thing being that he's down in London. So we've got that. The very popular Red Room is coming back in middle of July. I've got a model Lily tentatively scheduled for that. I worked with her one-on-one for a day, just over a week ago. Great model to work with. We actually shot most of the Red Room stuff ourselves, so that's her in the poster, and absolutely brilliant on that Red Room set, which is why I put the thing on the program, because I want her as the model for it. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a question mark over her availability. She's Italian, and if Italy goes onto the green list, she will be flying off to Italy. So we're waiting for the next announcement from Boris to confirm whether, basically, if you want to shoot the Red Room with Lily, let's hope Italy doesn't get onto the green list, because otherwise she'll be back over to Italy for a little while. So anyway, she is a brilliant model if she's available on that. If she's not available, one of the models that I don't use for the previous event, I will put in on the Red Room. And then my final one, first full day workshop here, is the rain shower one. And again, it's just 3 photographers for it. I've got a couple of models in mind for this. Again, I want to get the other ones booked, the models booked in for those first, and then I'll decide who's going to do this one. But it's a special workshop, and we create these rain effects here in the studio. The shot you can see on that e-flyer was shot basically where I'm sitting now, that was shot here under the rain setup. So I wanted to talk about those. I'm not going to bring them up every week on here, but just periodically when I've put new stuff up there, I want to mention them and try and convince some of you to actually book for that. So let's move on to copyright and watermarks. Oh, before I do, I've got another question come in on chat. Let's have a look at this one. Here's another one from Gary. Could I do a session on how best to set up an image for posting to Instagram and Facebook? The answer to that is yes, I could. I will try and remember to do that. I think it will either be if I put another catch-up section in towards the end of the before and after challenge, I can slot it in there, or it will be after the before and after challenge finishes. So round that point, because I've got the others I'm trying to tie in with that. But yeah, that's a really good one, and it's worth looking at, especially the Instagram one, because Instagram's a pain. But there are some things you can do in Lightroom which will make things a little bit easier for that. And I can show you my setup for Facebook. In fact, I'll touch on that in a moment. Right, so copyright and watermarks. This sort of came in as a question during the week, which led me to want to deal with this. And the question really was, is it worth putting watermarks on your images? And the answer to it isn't quite as simple as you might think on there. You all know my web images have a watermark on them, and I'm going to explain why I do that. I've already in the previous live stream gone through how to create those in Lightroom for when you export. I've explained that, I've shown how to create them and do that, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I am going to talk a little bit more about whether it's worth doing this or not. And in order to understand whether it's worth putting a watermark on your images, we need to really understand some of the principles to do with copyright, and why I take the approach that I do comes directly from that. So I'm going to look at the strategies behind that, and then I'm going to finish off by a tutorial within Photoshop about creating a paintbrush for doing watermarks. Right, copyright is very much misunderstood. One person who isn't watching the stream live but does watch on a regular basis, when I said I was going to do this, said he thought that once an image was put online, basically you were relinquishing your copyright. No. Just because you upload an image to the web does not make it public domain. It is not. It does not make it a shareable image legally in any way, shape or form. So copyright is retained by the photographer when you post it online, unless you deliberately relinquish your copyright, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And that also goes on is a very common misunderstanding from people is that, well, I can use the image because I credited the photographer. No, you can't. There may be circumstances where that is sufficient to use an image, and I'll talk about when that is, and that's under Creative Commons. But just crediting an image that you found online does not give you the right to use it at all. So the copyright stays with the photographer. The other thing to say is that by default, models do not have any rights to an image. They certainly do not have any copyright on an image. It is entirely it is entirely with the photographer who made that image. Unless you as a photographer grant the model rights. And some models will have a photographer release or a work release form, very similar to a model release form. Now, I don't want to get into model releases. That's a whole different topic. But just to say that a model release has nothing to do with copyright. It does not impact on your copyright on there. Oh yeah, and Rick says, nor does it mean when you've posted something up on line, it does not mean you can edit it and put a crap Instagram or TikTok filter over it. No, you can't. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. So, so yeah, with that, I want to explain what public domain is. And very briefly, anything that is in the public domain means that you have relinquished all rights over that item. Whether it is writing, it's an image, it's a drawing, it's a sculpture, whatever. It means that that work, or that video, is in the public domain and the author has no more rights to it than any other member of the public. That's what public domain means. Now, how does something become public domain? It becomes public domain one of two ways. Either the author, creator, photographer can release something as public domain, and they can put a note with it saying, this image is public domain. Once you do that, you cannot rescind it because somebody may have used it. It remains public domain at that point. The other way something can become public domain is when copyright expires on an image. When does copyright expire? In the UK, it expires 75 years after the death of the copyright holder in case of photographs. So there is a period of 75 years where the estate of the photographer has the copyright for it. And at that, once that expires, then it becomes into the public domain. Now, there are certain cases where an image is no longer isn't in the public domain, and it's or a work of fiction isn't in the public domain after the copyright, after more than 75 years after the creator's death. And an example of that is not a photography one, but a written one. The work of the Peter Pan stories by J.M. Barrie are not public domain, even though J.M. Barrie has been dead for more than 75 years. The reason behind that is because J.M. Barrie signed over the copyright to the Children's Hospital down in London. Mine's gone blank, can't they? Not Guy's, is it? No, I can't remember. Great Ormond Street. I think it's Great Ormond Street Hospital. He assigned the copyright to that organisation. So they are the copyright holders on it. And of course, it will stay with them until 75 years after they no longer exist. So there are those sort of exceptions on it. And authors of fiction tend to do co-copyright things with members of their family to prolong that. So I've seen that happen as well. So that's how something gets into public domain. The other one that you've probably come across is Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a collection of different releases, which basically is a photographer saying, yep, you can use this image subject to certain conditions. And what are those conditions? The copyright still remains with the originator, the photographer. What the photographer is doing is granting a license to use the image that is publicly available, and it is subject to certain conditions. Those restrictions might be you have to attribute the creator of the thing. It might be that you cannot use it commercially. It might be that you cannot use derivative works. One restriction with Creative Commons is that the restrictions follow through. So if you've created a derivative work based on somebody else's, you cannot then have that be more restrictive than the original license on there. With it. It's a big topic, but don't confuse Creative Commons with public domain. Yes, there is a, quote, Creative Commons public domain, which basically is Creative Commons acknowledging that public domain exists, and they're using that as a way for people to put it completely into public domain. But normally the restrictions will be no derivative works, no commercial works, and you must do attribution. Those tend to be the main three, and it can be any combinations thereof. So if something's been released on Creative Commons, you need to check what those restrictions actually are on there. So if that's what the copyright is all about, and you want to enforce that copyright, how do watermarks help you do it? Do they actually protect your work? Well, first of all, even before we get to watermarks, there is one other thing that you need to be aware of. And this is the idea that if you upload an image to, let's say, Facebook, for example, or Flickr or wherever. I'm going to use Facebook as the example because one person commented on this on the group, and I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding there, and I want to sort of cover this. If you look at the T's and C's, the things you agreed to when you signed up for Facebook, you will find that there is a clause in there which basically says that any photograph or image that you upload to Facebook, you give Facebook the permission to distribute. Now that sounds incredibly scary, but from a legal point of view, it's absolutely a necessary clause. And it's not unique to Facebook. You'll find it on Flickr, you'll find it on any platform that you upload to. Why is it there? It's because when you upload an image, they have to process it, produce a copy, and they will put that on multiple servers so that it can be displayed when people call it up. And that is legally a form of distribution. So without that clause in the terms and conditions, they wouldn't actually be able to display any of your images. So it is in there. It does sound scary, but it's there for a very genuine purpose. Does it mean that Facebook could suddenly decide that they are going to sell your photos? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that they could use them on another platform? By the letter of the law, possibly. But in reality, they're just not going to do that. It's not what the clause is there for. And until there is some better legal language to talk about distribution to be able to serve the image up to people who are looking at it, that sort of clause is going to stay there. So don't panic too much about that clause if you see it or you hear people saying, oh, you're giving away all your rights to Facebook. You are giving away a very specific right that they are going to use in a very specific way on there. And I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but on this occasion, I don't think it's anything worth worrying about. The other thing that I want to talk about with this is about using watermarks not to protect your work. They do not protect your work. What they do is they give you the ability to assert your rights and to assert your copyright. Because the argument goes that someone can use and abuse your image, and a fair defense is that they didn't know whose image it was. It's all about, they call it orphan works. And it could be that they would apply that and say, well, sorry, you didn't make this clear that it wasn't covered by, it wasn't public domain. You didn't make this clear that it wasn't covered by Creative Commons by attribution on there. So using a watermark to assert your copyright is what I do. I don't put my watermark on my image to, quote, stop somebody stealing it, because it doesn't do that. People could easily steal it. They can easily crop out my watermark. It's not there for that. It's there if I had to argue that they knew my image was not available for use. So, for example, if somebody took one of my watermarked images and used it on there, they would have to do one of two things. They would either have to leave my watermark, which says no use permitted without prior permission, or they would have to crop it out. In either case, that proves that they have seen the restriction. The argument against using watermarks is that they can spoil the look of your images. And this is certainly true. They can get in the way of an image. And that's why mine always just go down in typically the bottom left corner, out of the way. It has the information I need on there, and hopefully it doesn't look too distracting on there. It's not going to stop somebody copying your work. It's not going to stop them downloading it. And it's probably not going to stop them editing them and doing things like that with them. But it gives you that basis to argue that this image has been used illegally and to fight your corner on that. In some cases, the presence of that watermark will put people off. It will put some people off. It will alert some people. I like to think that most people are honest, and if they see the wording on there, no prior use, then they'll take a step back. In fact, I am forever answering emails from models where I've supplied watermarked images which have that on there, and them coming back to me and saying, does this mean I can't use the images? No, you've got prior permission. You're the model in there. Of course you can use it. It's just to protect you, protect me, and on that. But the majority of people will see it and they may take a step back. And there may come a time where you need to be able to prove that somebody used your image illegally and to assert your rights on there. And having that on there makes it so much easier to fight your corner on there. It shows it's been used deliberately and illegally on there. So this is how mine look. It's my logo, my name, and the words no use without prior permission underneath it on there. So I'm asserting my copyright, I'm telling people they can't use it, and I've got my advertising on there. And I don't think that's too distracting on the image for web work, and that's what I do. If you want to know how I create those, several live streams ago. I've got I go through the process of that. Now, why is it important? Let me just tell you how I used this. It wasn't a watermark on this particular case, but the principle is exactly the same. Somebody was using one of my images illegally, and I periodically I do a search on my name on online, typically to try and find uses of images images that I've sold through Alamy, to find out where people are using the images. And I came across one image which I knew hadn't been sold through Alamy, and I looked at it, and it was an image I created years ago, and it's one I'd posted on Flickr. And yes, I got copyright Ian Butterfield watermark on there, but that's all it had said, copyright Ian Butterfield. And this image was being used on a blog post by not somebody I'd ever heard of, but sort of a bit of a pundit in the States, who, when I looked into her name, has appeared on lots of TV shows talking about positivity for women and things like that, and empowerment for women. And when we looked at her listings, she was making big money out of her name. And on her blog post, she'd used one of my images which had been lifted off Flickr. So I did a bit of research, found her email address, and emailed her directly. And what I did was, I didn't go in all guns blazing on it. I went in saying, I notice you're using one of my images, and I notice you've been using it for about 6 years, by which, before I did that, I must say, I did screenshots of absolutely everything before I contacted her, because I knew the moment I contacted her, it would be taken down. So I contacted her and said, look, you've used this illegally on there. This has been lifted off my Flickr stream, and you've put it up there. And I want to thank you for putting the credit on there, but I make my living through selling photos, and it's not fair on my paying clients that you use it for free if they're having to pay for it, because it's an image I'm selling. So I'm going to have to charge you for the use of it, and this is what you would have paid had you sourced it through Alamy. Plus, I put an extra fee on there for finding it, which will be, I said, if you settle up within 14 days, I'll take that off. But if you don't, that's on there. Well, I didn't get a reply immediately. The image was immediately taken down, but no reply. So I thought, right, okay, this is a person whose reputation, she's making a living off her reputation about treating people fairly on that. So I thought, well, what do I do now? So I contacted her again. After a couple of weeks, I said, oh, I noticed you've taken it down, not had a reply from you on that. I'm sure that's just an oversight on your part. And just for your reference, I'm not blaming you on this. Whoever was looking after your website at the time, 6 years ago, is probably the person responsible for this, and they've probably just misunderstood. But nevertheless, the fee still stands on that. At this point, I start getting a reply, and they said, but we got it off Flickr, and it was on there as Creative Commons, and we gave you a credit on there. We don't need to pay anything. That's when, having information to hand that I was asserting my copyright on there, I was able to send a screen grab showing that it was all rights reserved underneath it on Flickr, that it was not showing up as Creative Commons on there, and therefore it had been used illegally. I'm basically saying you ain't got a leg to stand on. And all credit to the person concerned. Once I was able to provide that information and the proof that the information was there, took the image, they paid up. And I got, I'm trying to think how much I charged. I think it was about £110 I charged for that. So that's 110 quid I wouldn't have got had I not got something which enabled me to assert my copyright and assert the proof that they shouldn't have been using it. So that is why I believe having that sort of thing is important on there. And we've got that horrible bar on there, not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming again. So my apologies if it's buffering on that. I'm going to go back and carry on best I can with it. So let's head over into Photoshop and I'll do a tutorial on watermark brushes and talk a little bit more about how to watermark an image to protect it as I do so. So let's go to Photoshop. And the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a brush with a logo. So I've opened here my studio logo, and creating a custom brush is really, really easy. You need an image which is basically monochrome. And this works really well because my logo just happens to be black and white. And the way a custom brush works is the black area is the brush, the white is the background. So I've just got black and white on there, and it's as simple as File, Define Brush Preset, and give it a name. IMB Studio Logo. So, okay, I'm going to go over to another document. This is from the shoot I was doing with Tatiana, and I can set my my color to black, and I could just drop in my logo in the corner there like that. Now that's a little bit difficult to see there, maybe in a lighter area. And I could choose the right spot to place this. I could actually have Tatiana wearing some branded clothing. No, maybe not. But I could put my logo wherever I want. Now, the downside with this is it's one colour. So I've got the black, but what should be white is transparent with it. But it's a way of doing it. The other thing you can do with something like this is I could change my brush opacity, take it right down, change the size of my brush. Actually, let's make this full screen so you can see. Make my brush really large, and I could just put a simple watermark right over the image. That's probably not opaque enough. If I take that opacity down to say 14, I could just put a mark over there to protect my image like that. So that makes it hard for people to do anything with it. It kind of spoils the image though, but I don't do that kind of approach with it. But I know some people who like that. They like to put their watermark across an image large to protect it. So that's one way of doing it. And that just makes it a little bit tricky for people to use. But of course, that's just a logo. That's not asserting the use. So what I'm going to do with this, because I'm going to come back to this, I'm just going to flip the that, go to white, small brush on here, and I could just put a logo like that in the corner. And that I think is quite nice. It's a nice pale version of the logo. I could do it pure white. I might undo that and just put a proper pure white logo in a corner, and I can choose where I want it on the image. So I could do it. I might think, well, it's more sense to put up there. So I could do that sort of thing with a brush like that. Now I'm going to put that one up there. In fact, I'm just going to put a logo down there like that. So I've got there. Now I want to assert my copyright. So let me do something slightly different. So I'm going to create a new document, file, new, and let's see, yeah, that'll do. We'll go create on there. It's white, and I'm just going to go into text, and I'm going to use my standard font that I use on things, which is Anton, and I'm just going to create text layers over here. And the first one I'm going to do is the copyright symbol. And well, actually, I'm going to make sure I'm writing in black first of all. I'm also going to put my font size up to 772. And my copyright symbol is Alt, and then on the keypad 0169. I release that. And it's white up there. Sorry, make that black. So I've got the copyright symbol on that, and I'm just going to make that a little bit larger. Ooh. Control T. Oh, wrong mode. Control T. Make that nice and large on there. So, a nice copyright symbol in the corner. That's probably a little bit big. It's about there. And then another text layer. And let's get this centered up. I'm going to say in caps, copy, no, in caps, copy, right. And again, let's size that. And I want that to fit in there. And yeah, stretch that. Do that the right sort of thing. So copyright. And another text layer. This time not. Wow, why is that so large? Don't want it that large. Again. My name in. And again, let's size that. To say copyright in and Butterfield, and then underneath there, final one, I might just put no use permitted without prior permission. And let's size that under there. And just extend that to there. So now I've got, that's going to be my, for sake of argument, my copyright notice that's going to go there. Hang on, something's gone wrong, and you can't see any of this, can you? Because I've been looking at the screen. Right, okay, hang on, let's work out what's been going on. Right, okay, I've come out of full screen. Right, okay, let's just go back on this. Why? Yeah. I misclicked, that's why. So, right, okay, just to try and explain what I've done. Basically, I've just put text on there and I've sized it on that. So now I'm going to create my custom brush based on it, which is, again, edit, define brush preset, and this is IMB, oops, copyright. So I shouldn't. Not sure that worked. Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it did. I can see that. So now if I go over to here, I've now got the brush with that on. And again, change the brush size to square brackets. I could put that message in the corner. So I've got my message in there. And do that. And I think white is nice on there. So let's take that down a little bit. I can then just pop that in the corner like that. So I've got my copyright statement, I've got my logo on there. Now, if you want to take this one stage further, and you think, well, okay, that's going to be fairly easy to clone those out, or it could be cropped, those could be cropped out on there. What you might want to do is change your mode to overlay, take your opacity down to about 30%, and then a small brush, and I've seen this done quite a bit. You find parts of the image that's going to be really tricky to crop out, so maybe the arm there, and you just put that in. That makes it difficult for people to crop out and doesn't spoil the image too much. And in this one, I might put another one down here, just to because that, again, that's an area that's difficult to Photoshop out. Might do it just a little bit larger, and because it's a brush, you can just change the size of it to what you want on there. And that's one way of protecting your image with the things. Is that something I would do? No. For me, all I want to do, I just want to export very quickly with that logo in the corner and the words in there. But I just wanted to show you another way of doing it. If you are concerned, this idea of the overlay of the copyright notice on different parts of the image would help. You can go to silly lengths with it if you want. And yeah, I've protected my image. Nobody's going to use that. Nobody's going to look at it either because there's so many messages on there. But it's a way of doing it. That's what I wanted to show with that tutorial. So sorry about the hiccup in the middle of all that. Hope you found it helpful and the technique on that. So now let me try and get back to a more sensible display. PowerPoint. And over. Right. On there. Right. As I say, sorry about that last bit. So let's moving along. Tonight's live stream is sponsored by, as ever, you, and tonight's cuppa comes courtesy of Rick Bradbury. So cheers, Rick. On there. How are we doing for time? Right, okay, time has moved on. And I've got no more questions on here. Right. I've not got that many images to go through on feedback. I think that's probably more important than walking through the shoot I did. I'm going to head over to Lightroom anyway. Let's see how quick it takes me to go through the Facebook images. There's only 9 of them. Right. At the full screen. Right, we've got here a shot from Paul van den Hoorn, which is an image of the moon. A little bit of feedback on this one. Paul did give a bit of information about the shot. He shot at f11, 250mm. It would have been better if you could get closer in, so a longer lens if you had one. The general rule for photographing the moon is set your set it to f8 and set your ISO and your shutter speed to be the same. So with this, I would have shot at let's see, ISO 400, 400th of a second. So this, I guess, was quite dark and you had to lighten it up, Paul, on there. I have got a tutorial coming up on the YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks, all about shooting the moon. If you want to see it before then, have a hunt through the live streams because it's on there. But it's a lovely shot. I like the colouring of it. It just needs going to the next level on there. On that, Sonia, really like this on there. Love those slanting windows on the staircase there. I'd probably have just straightened the verticals, but that would have caused a problem with the door. So you just need to just think a little bit about those with that. What would have happened if you'd have shot straight on at the tower? That's another angle you might want to have considered on there. And very quickly, is there anything left in those highlights that can be recovered? Answer is no, there isn't. I don't think. Dehaze, will that give it anything? Yeah, there's a little bit there, but on the JPEG, it's not going to do any good on there. So might be one to try sky replacement on. The clouds you used on that other one I mentioned would probably work quite well on this one, but lovely shot. John, you described this as a lucky shot. I can see it's been zoomed in quite a way. Not quite so lucky for the insect that's flying straight at the bird on there. But yeah, nice, sharp, little bit noisy. Maybe a touch of noise reduction needed on there. So, no, not transform, detail. So let's have a look. Yeah, it's a little bit noisy. Can we deal with that? Just a fraction, and then sharpen and mask it. Right there. I'm not sure it's helped much, to be honest. Let's have a look before or after with it. Oh. Yeah, it's just sharpened it up fractionally on there with that. So yeah, nice shot, well presented. Sonia, this one, I do genuinely like your underwater macros, but I'm sort of struggling to know what I'm looking at with this in terms of there appears to be lots of legs and something sticking out here. I think this one's just a little bit confusing on there. Ruskin, another great one, but again, I say this every time, please send me some of these via the email address so I can have a look at your shooting data, because I think there's a lot going on here. It's also slightly dark, again, just needs what's that, half a stop, just lightening up to 2/3 to make that one work. John Barton, yeah, really nice shot of Blackpool, and your horizon straight. Not sure about the darkened area up there. Would it crop down? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'd probably crop it down so that horizon's not in the middle, to about the third line there, like that. I think that's a stronger image for doing that with it on there. Again, another nice shot, Sonia, on there. It's slightly overexposed, I would say, this one. I'd be just tempted to bring it back very, very slightly. Again, about half a stop on there. Right, this one was the question, should it be that one or that one, cropped or not? Well, I'm going to go mid-ground on this, and I would crop it like this. I would bring it down because I don't like the line at the top on there. I'd bring that down, bring that up slightly, and then I would find the middle point of both of these, and I would go with a crop that looks like that. So these are very much framing elements. So I could probably come in a little bit more on both sides there, like that. And I think that works nicely. Now, your Ina Maria, that was your crop. Can you see how these aren't balanced now? I think it needs that little bit of balance between the two, with the two bits of the balustrade on there. So yeah, it is a lovely sharp image. We've got plenty of resolution to it, so I would say that is a cracking shot. It's been nicely sharpened as well. There's just starting to get halos, but nothing to worry about. I wouldn't go any further. You've gone as far as you can with that sharpening. So really good shot. Thank you for sharing it with us on there with that. So I'm thinking of, I'll hold back that share about talking about that shoot that I did, I think. Much as I'd like to, on it, I think time is against me on it with that. So let's have a final look at what's going on. I say I'll skip that. Nothing new in the comments. So I've looked at your images. Nothing new on there. So it should just be for me to reveal this week's member photo of the week. And this week it is the moonshot from Paul van den Hoorn. If I've pronounced your name wrong, my apologies, Paul, if I've got that wrong. And this is what it will look like as the banner for the Facebook group for the week. And I'll make that change very shortly. So please keep uploading, folks, and maybe one of your images will be the image next week. So last look at chat, nothing more to say on that. So next Sunday I am going to give a beginner's guide to flash photography and how we work with flash, and that ties in with the before and after exercise that I'll be sharing next week on there. So post your flash images to the Facebook group and I'll talk about those next week. And so until next week, thanks for watching. Sorry about the problem. Hang on, I've just seen a question pop up on my chat before I finish. Let me deal with it. I'm wondering whether I've got a delay on the chat here. But yeah, Walter says, how effective are reverse image search programs for seeing where your image has been used? Pretty effective, actually. I use the Google one, and that's not too bad. I've picked up one or two that way. They're not going to find everything with it, and if things have been cropped, sometimes I've used it, and it has helped me to find images that way on there. In fact, I did that the other day to find an image of a model, Marita, whose photograph I'd sold just recently for a newspaper. I bet that's going to be on one of their websites, and I managed to find it so I could send her the link and tell her about it. So yeah, it does work that way on there. So, right, let's finally finish and just say thanks for watching, folks, and keep making great photos, and I will see you next week. Right, just the cut down version of the ending to record, just in case I need it. So here goes. Thanks for watching this cut down version of In Studio Live. The full version's in my academy. Bits of it are being posted up onto YouTube, so make sure you subscribe. And if you want to support me, go and join the academy, and you've got lots of resources in there. So until next time, thanks for watching and keep making great photos. Bye for now.